Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me for Breeze Time this morning. I wanted to announce that starting in August, I will be doing one of these sort of informal devotional talks once a week at Breeze Time every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. I hope you enjoy it. And I know I enjoy talking to you and sharing my memories and thoughts with you on an informal basis, since we don't get to stand around in the halls and chat too much right now. But I'm always eager to see you with your mask on and appropriately distanced whenever we can. So I thought I'd share with you some of my adventures / misadventures that I've had in my time with in my life. And one of them was really a time I'd like to share when Chuck and I decided we would build his dream workshop. Well, it sort of came about this way. He always had an idea of what he wanted to be his dream workshop. It would have to be big, and he wanted like a 20 by 60, which is huge. People build houses that big, 20 by 60. And he wanted it big enough that and tall enough that he could drive a school bus in there, because it was his plan to convert a school bus into a camper. He'd done it once before, but unfortunately, that particular camper had the building had caught fire, and he'd lost his shop. But anyway, and his camper. But that had been a good 20 years before, and now he always wanted to build a dream shop. Well, we just didn't have the land for it at all. However, when my mother was about 81, she fell. And if you remember, I've talked about the place I grew up. The place I grew up was a house. It was an old wood frame house built around 1910 in Belchase, just about 20 miles downriver from New Orleans. And it was on about just under 2 acres of land, and went all the way back up to the Mississippi River. And we've talked about that, I think, from time to time. Now, Mom's house, she had the front part cleared, and that was a nice patch of part of the land that the house sat on, and she kept it up as a nice yard with all kinds of fruit trees and everything. But there was about 2/3 of it was in woods. We called it woods. It was uncleared land, and been that way for a long time. So I suppose it was wooded. Well, as it turned out, when Mom was about 81 years old or so, she fell. Now, the house was quite comfortable for Mom. She'd modified it a little bit after Dad died, took the insurance money and made a few changes. She converted it. She gave up one of the bedrooms, so it went from 3 bedrooms to 2. And she put a bath in, so she could have a nice big bath with a walk-in shower with a bench on it, and then she wanted a big walk-in closet. And so she ended up making it quite comfortable for herself, and she added a very pretty sunroom on where she liked to sit. And it was very nice for her. Well, unfortunately, Mom was about 81 years old. She'd been living by herself since Dad died in 1983, so I suppose it was probably 1994 or so, right then. So it's been over 20 years since she'd changed, modified, renovated the house and everything. But unfortunately, she fell. And now, she didn't break anything, thank goodness. She fell on the carpet, and she ended up just not being able to get up for about an hour and a half. And this kind of shook her, made her concerned. So she decided she didn't want to give up living in her own home, but she didn't really want to live alone anymore. She really wanted somebody to come live with her. So she talked with all of her children. There were 5 of us, and unfortunately, of course, my sister Cindy was living out in Seattle. My brother Bill was living up in Shreveport. They had their jobs, their businesses, and my other brother and sister Dexter and Betsy, none of them really felt like it was something they could do at that time. And Chuck and I, we didn't live that far away. We lived in a subdivision And it wasn't a whole lot of, it wasn't a huge lot, certainly not big enough to build the dream shop. But Chuck said, well, we could move down there. We'd have to put an addition on your mother's house, and I could go ahead and build my dream shop, build my shop, and we could temporarily stay in the shop while I go ahead, and it would give me a workshop and everything I need, and I can build the addition. It would take me probably about a year and a half, year or so to build the addition. But I think that'd be the most cost-effective way to do it. So we talked with Mom, and we all decided that was the way to go. So we were going to build Chuck's dream shop. Like I told you, it was big, 20 feet wide, 60 feet long, 20 feet at the eaves, 14 feet at the 14 feet at the eaves, like on the sides, and then the peak was up 20 feet. And plus, he decided he wanted a nice high concrete slab, so the slab was about 2 feet tall. And he poured it, it was built on a slab. It was like he ordered a big erector set. You remember those erector sets you had when you were kids? And it came with the metal frame, and then you made wood, 2x6s, all over the place, called purlings, that you connected between there all the way up, and then you attach sheet metal to the outside. And I picked a nice neutral green because we were going to put it back in the woods on about halfway back on the property. And we didn't want his shop. His shop was awfully big. We didn't want it to be a big eyesore, and we had lots of room, so we didn't want it too close to the house. So, and Chuck's dream shop, you see, the reason we could stay there while he built it was because his dream shop not only had to be big enough to drive a school bus into and work on in there, but it also had to be big enough that he could have his own office. And his dream office, of course, would have to have air conditioning, and it would have to have a bathroom because he wanted to be able to change his clothes, and he wanted to be able to change his clothes and to take a shower and change his clothes before he went inside. When he was finished work, and he wanted that. That was all part of his dream shop. So, anyway, what he did was, we were going to go ahead and work on that, and so we did. First step, we had to clear the land. Now, clearing the land was we had a couple of mishaps there because, for one thing, Michael and I are very allergic to poison ivy, and we got into the poison ivy while we were trying to clear that land, and that's my son, Michael. He was probably about 14 years old at the time, and we were working on clearing the land, and don't you know, we got into the poison ivy, head to toe. We were both miserable. Had to go to the doctor, get the regular old Benadryl creams and the poison ivy creams, calamine lotion, none of that was enough. We ended up having to get steroids and all this kind of stuff till we finally got it cleared out. But the land got cleared, but unfortunately, while we were clearing the land, I can remember one day I was out there and Chuck discovered something about me. I can remember I moved a log that was there, and lo and behold, there was a snake. I screamed because I don't like snakes. I'm scared of snakes. I don't even watch snakes on television. I don't like it. I close my eyes. I hate it when those people want to play with snakes on TV. Yuck. I don't want anything to do with snakes. And so I yelled. Well, my husband, knows me well, and he said, "I guess you found a snake." And I said, "Yeah." And I was now 20 feet away from that spot. So he went over there and he found the snake, and he said, "Well, it's a harmless snake. What we'll do is I'll go ahead and and he picked it up with a stick, and he carried it off way back in the woods and got rid of it. But it wasn't a bad snake at all, and it wasn't a bad snake. I don't know what kind of snake it was. Didn't matter. I didn't care. I don't like any snakes, and I figure that way I don't have to worry about whether they're poisonous or not. Though there are a lot of poisonous snakes in South Louisiana. Rattlesnakes and water moccasins mainly are the two you think of when you think about poisonous snakes, but I think we also have copperheads and other nasty snakes. But in my book, they're all nasty, even though I know they're really not, but I'd stay away from them all. So we got the land cleared. Now it was time. He poured the slab, and that was a big deal, and then we had to put up the steel framing. What you do is you had the girders that came, remember my erector set? They were the uprights, and they formed the roof part. They were these frames, and then you ran long ways between them. You ran the 2x6s. They called them purlings. I guess they counted as rafters too, but I don't know. They were called purlings. I don't know why, but they were horizontal all the way up and up to the roof. Well, we were working on that part of it, and I remember my nephew James, he was probably about 17 or so at the time, and he'd come to help, 18, and my brother Bill, and when it was nice, family pitched in and gave us a good hand. They lived up in Shreveport, but they came and they helped, and that was great. But silly me, I was walking underneath where they were working overhead. I wasn't wearing a hard hat, and don't you know, James dropped his drill and boom, I got a cut right there on my head. I still have a little lump from where I had to get stitches. I survived, but you know how it is when somebody hits their head, it always bleeds a lot. So it was all very dramatic looking and everything. Well, we got that done, and I survived with my stitches. It was no big deal. And then Chuck and I worked on it by ourselves a lot. And so I was helping him. I remember we were starting, we put the sheet metal around the sides first before we put the sheet metal on the roof. I don't remember exactly why that was, but there was a reason. Chuck told me. So we were trying to put the sheet metal on the sides, and on the sides where it was only 14 foot from the concrete slab up to the eaves, it wasn't so bad because it really wasn't that heavy, and I could hold them up, and Chuck could be up on the ladder, and he would screw them in. And that worked real well. Well, then we got to the sides, and they were 20 feet long when we got to the part where the peak of the roof is. Well, I couldn't lift it up. So we switched positions. Now here's another thing. See, I'm afraid of snakes, and I don't like heights. All right. See, I got two quirks. You know, what are you going to call it? Phobias, I suppose. But it's not quite so bad. I mean, heights I can deal with. I just don't like them. I had, kind of avoided them when I could. Well, for this one I had to remember those purlings, they're the ones that are horizontal, so you can climb them almost like a ladder, and I climbed all the way up to the top of the purlings, and Chuck lifted this 20-foot piece of sheet metal there, and I'm sort of on the side of it. He's got the holes pre-drilled, so I just have to put, he used electric drills with bits in them. So, he used, so he pre-drilled the holes, and I had the one for putting in the wood screws that we had the sheet metal screws that we had to use. And so it was like zzz, 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 and you got it in. Well, I managed to get it in, and then I was supposed to come down, except I looked down, and I'm up 20 feet. I don't like it, okay? I'm afraid. So all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. It's like I froze. I just grabbed onto it, and Chuck said, "Come on down." And I went, and I was hyperventilating. It was probably my one and only true anxiety attack. What a pathetic time. But there I was clinging to it. And Chuck tried to talk me down, and finally he climbed halfway up, and when he was close by, he climbed up to me, and we went down the purlings together. What an idiot I felt like. afterwards. But I got over it. I was determined we were going to finish this shop. And it was real important that we finish the shop. It really was. So, I survived the panic attack. I survived the snakes. I survived the poison ivy. Well, now we get to doing the roof. Now he got the sheet metal up there and he got it tacked into place. So we could walk on there, but in order to secure the sheet metal, you had to put a whole bunch of screws in each piece. You had to put screws every couple of feet or something, all the way along the length and the width of it to really hold it down. So there we go. The easiest way to do that, remember I told you we're using handheld power drills, right? And if you go ahead and drill the hole yourself, you have to use one bit to drill the hole, and then you have to take that bit out, you have to put another bit in to put in the sheet metal screw. So it's take it out, put the next one in, and that one's, and then you got to repeat and again. So really the easiest way is just to have one person drilling the holes in the sheet metal and the other one coming through and putting in the wood screws. So I went ahead and I pre-drilled all the holes. Now you got to remember this roof is 60 feet long, okay? And so we started at one end and I drilled the holes, and Chuck was coming behind me, putting in the wood screws, sheet metal screws, putting in the sheet metal screws, for the whole 60 feet, except I got pretty far ahead of him. It was quicker to drill the holes than it was to put in the sheet metal screws. I suppose Chuck wanted to make sure they were secure. And I finished before he did, which meant we started at this end of the roof, and I finished at this end. So I went and he's about 2/3 of the way through, I suppose. And so I go all the way back, and I want to go down the ladder. I'm going to get off this roof. Remember, I'm not crazy about heights. I dealt with it. And for the most part, when I was in the middle of the roof, I was fine. It was when I was close to the edges that I'd really get uncomfortable. Well, Chuck had this funny thing about ladders. I don't know if I can explain it to you, but basically, if you got a ladder, like this is the edge of the roof. See, Chuck liked to have the ladder with only about 6 inches, maybe 8 inches, maybe less than a foot of the top of the ladder over the roof. Because his plan was, when he wanted to go down the ladder, Chuck would climb down the roof. He'd go over the top of the ladder and go down. And he was comfortable doing that. I didn't like that. I wanted the ladder to be up like 3 feet taller than the roof, or 4 feet taller than the roof, so I could really grab onto it and then step around and go down. That's what I wanted to do. So I tried to go down. I told him I was going down, and he's still over there working. Yeah, go ahead. And I got over there, and I tried to climb over the roof that way, the way he did, kind of backing up. And couldn't do it. So it occurs to me that the ladder we have leaning up against the house is an extension ladder, okay? Well, that means that you can adjust it for height. So that ladder has plenty of room to come up higher, so I can raise it up the 4 feet or so that I want in order to be able to step around it. And if you notice, it has hooks. Extension ladders have hooks that lock into place. Like you can pull it one way, get bigger, and then when you go down, if you adjust it properly, the hooks will set in place and it'll be secure. Well, I pulled it up the 4 feet and got it there, and I wanted to make sure the hooks had caught so that when I stepped on it, it would be solid. And it seemed okay, but I wasn't quite sure. So I kind of took my foot, I laid on the roof, and I And I raised my foot up a little bit and I tapped the top of it right in the center just to make sure it was secure before I tried to stand on it. And when I did, I heard boom. And what had happened was the ladder had collapsed and then fallen over to the side. Oh no, I thought. Chuck, who's over on the other side of the roof, said, "Don't say a word. I know what happened. We'll deal with it when I'm finished." And I knew he wasn't happy. He said, "Dear heart, don't say a word." And I knew I was in trouble because Chuck only used dear heart when he was really mad at me. He had lots of other sweet names for me. Baby doll and dearest and sweetheart and beloved. But dear heart was reserved for when he was annoyed with me, believe me. So I sat over there and I knew I was in trouble. Not only was I in trouble because we're stuck on the roof, but I'm in trouble because I kind of did something stupid. If I'd have waited for him instead of being so anxious to get off the roof, if I'd been patient until he came, he could have either helped me deal with the ladder the way he had it, or he could have fixed it so I could have gotten there. He certainly could have gone down first and then raised it up for me. But no, I wanted to get off the roof. I wanted to do it now. I didn't want to admit I was afraid. And so I tried to do it myself, and lo and behold, we are stuck on the roof. Well, so about 20 minutes later, Chuck finishes putting all his screws in, and he comes over to where I'm sitting on the middle of the roof, far from the edges, and waiting. And of course, remember I told you we cleared a patch in the woods. Now this shop was high enough we could see the houses, but there wasn't anybody in their yards. And I could see there wasn't any cars at the neighbors, and that were close enough for us to see. No cars in the yard, and I knew they worked. And the only one at home up at my mother's house was my mother, and she couldn't come out. I mean, she was 82 years old. And was walking with a cane. Well, I think a walker by then. And she couldn't come out and put a ladder up and adjust it and everything. And that was not something we could ask her to do. So we are stuck on the roof. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I think. Well, people usually come home from work around 4:30, 5 o'clock. If we're lucky. We just try and catch somebody, except I thought, oh, Chuck's got a cell phone. And I know it was a long time ago. This is probably 1993, 94. But my husband had gotten a cell phone from as early as the days when he was a gadget man. When you had to carry him around in a big bag phones they used to call them. But now what he had at that time was a cell phone probably about this big, and it had an antenna on it. It was that Motorola one that looked for all the world like a World War II walkie-talkie, big old thing. And he was a police officer, and he was a gadget man, so he's used to wearing things on his waist. So he had a special holster for his work clothes that let him put that cell phone in, and he wore it all the time. Well, he did a lot of work on roofs and things like that. So anyway, I went ahead. So I said, well, honey, we can call the neighbors. None of the neighbors are home, so it won't do any good to call anybody. Is there anybody we can think of to call? And of course, there wasn't anybody who lived close by that we could call. And then I said, well, I guess we could call 911. And he said, absolutely not. And I looked at him. And he was still mad at me, and I could tell. And that absolutely not was very firm. He said, I am a police officer with the sheriff's department. He said, if I call the fire department to come and get me off a roof, do you realize I will never live it down? I'd rather sit up here till somebody comes home, one of the neighbors comes home, than call the fire department to come get me off this roof. And I go, oh, okay. So, well, we sat, and we sat, and we sat, and probably about an hour later, we saw my neighbor Laurie drive in. Now Laurie had lived she grew up next door, and she still lived in the family home, and she was my age, a year younger really. So we called her when we saw she went into the house, and she laughed. She came out and she stood down on the ground and she laughed and she laughed. She says it was really pretty funny, and I guess it was, to see us stuck up there on the roof. And she teased us a little bit. She said, oh, well, let's see. This is a real interesting position. Let me think if there's anything I need right now. She said, maybe Chuck, because Chuck, as I told you, Chuck was an electrician. He also he did heating and air conditioning, and he was pretty much good at anything he did. He could do anything mechanical, anything technical, pretty much anything. He didn't do wonderful finished carpentry, but he did good, solid, basic, rough carpentry. Did a great job on just about anything he did. Chuck could fix just about anything. And so she said, well, I have a ceiling fan. She goes, no, my husband can probably do the ceiling fan, but I think maybe doing the three-way switch I want in my living room is something beyond him, and I know Chuck could do that. No, maybe I ought to just take a picture and save it when something comes up. And she teased, and we knew she was just teasing. And you gotta give people their due under those circumstances when they're doing you a favor, and you kind of made a fool of yourself. And of course, it was me who had made the fool of us. So Laurie put the ladder up, and down we came. We got it done. And the roof was finished. And basically all the sheet metal by that time was up. Now there's still more things about us living in the shop and working on the house that I'll probably talk to you about another time, but I have to admit, you learn a lot about yourself with the things you do. I learned I needed to have more patience, and if I had just waited for Chuck, we wouldn't have been stuck on that roof. I learned about the things I really am afraid of. I'd avoided heights so much. I didn't know how reluctant I was with them. And I hadn't liked to think too much about how much I didn't like snakes. But you live and you learn. And Chuck forgave me for leaving us up there on the roof. Years later, we laughed about it, but it took a little while. All right, it's been good talking to you today, and I hope you've enjoyed our time together. And I hope to see you all soon. God bless.